Hey, Shaun, thanks for coming along to have a chat, tell your story. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Grant. You find me in the newly opened Rocketspark launch pad, but while Grant is at home. But yeah, I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to chat all things sort of my journey and all things Rocketspark.
Yeah, it's quite ironic that here I am at home and we're operating in these kind of alternate bubbles with Rocketspark, and you're actually in
Yeah,
Launchpad, kind of the shared space, hanging out, using the meeting kind of bubble. Um,
yeah,
so
cool.
when we caught up, like when we caught up a couple of weeks ago, I really enjoyed our chat, and it was just fascinating, in terms of hearing your story sort of through the Olympics and sort of overcoming the odds and team culture and things like that. And then after your post Olympic life and starting a business. And it was just like, it's just too good not to kind of share that story with others. And I kind of think, it could be the impetus for, selling the movie rights or something, like the journey that you guys had, and then your journey now. And so, so thanks for jumping on. And so as a starting point, I'd just kind of love to hear kind of in just your Olympic story. It kind of seemed like a really overcoming the odds. You had quite a journey to get there, and just love to see what it was like. Like, I sit as this kind of watching from the outside, but you were there living the ups and downs. So for me, entertaining. Loved the journey, but yeah, how was it?
Yeah, I suppose it's a massive sort of wild journey, and I suppose the best place to start is sort of the beginning. And yeah, so for a bit of context, I'm a New Zealand rower. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a New Zealand rower for the past sort of 10 years. And in that time, I've pretty much been in the New Zealand men's eight every single year. And so we formed a New Zealand men's eight with the goal of sort of bringing home an Olympic medal and recreating history. The only ever time New Zealand has won Olympic gold in the men's eight was 1972, and so that was our legacy that we were trying to live up to. And in 2013, we put together an eight that was initially it was an under 23 eight, so an age group eight, and the idea was that we wanted to be competitive by the time we got to the Rio 2016 Olympics, and we wanted to be on the podium by the time we got to Tokyo. And so that was the big far off goal in 2013, and we sort of hit the ground running. We're wide-eyed, enthusiastic, and we actually got some pretty good results early on. 2013 and 2014, we won under 23 world champs both years. And so what that did is it was almost a bad thing, because as being young early 20s athletes, we come along, we wipe the floor with under 23 world champs, and then we're thinking, all right, let's take on the world, let's win all these world champs, elite world champs, and win the Olympics. And pretty much the opposite of that happened for years on years on years. It was a pretty grueling journey, and it was quite humbling stepping up to sort of the elite level of rowing and realizing the difference between an under 23 level and an Olympic level. And so we managed to scrape into the Olympics in 2016. So you have to qualify just to get to the Olympics, and we managed to make the cut for that. But then Rio 2016, we finished sixth, so that was pretty disappointing. We were one of the slowest dates there. And then we thought, all right, let's build to Tokyo being the next target. And over the years, we had sort of people coming and going from the eight, and I was pretty much the only person that stayed in it every single year. Maybe I was the only insane person that kept on believing in it with being beaten down so many times. But yeah, it was a lot of losses, and so 2017 rolled around, and again we finished sixth. So it felt like we were making no progress against the international field. And then 2018 rolled around, and this was like the true low point. We finished dead last. We were the slowest eight on the entire Olympic field, or World Champs field, slowest eight by a margin. And at that point, I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, we started off with a hiss and a roar, got probably a little bit arrogant, and the results just got worse and worse and worse the following years. And so, yeah, getting to the Olympics, just getting there felt like Everest to me. It just felt felt massive. But then, yeah, I sort of started in the back of my mind, I started realizing that that my love for rowing was being eroded by all these poor results, and so that sort of like was a motivation for me to start sort of working on the side. So I was turning off my phone, and yeah, and so I picked up some part-time work with CAS Design alongside my rowing, and I continued on. I sort of had reached the point where I had invested so much into the sport that it felt like a shame to give up what was, I thought, 2 years before the Olympics in 2018. And so, yeah, we went on to 2019, and 2019 was a crucial year. That was the year that we needed to secure our place at the 2020 Olympics. And
that's through like a qualification process, like it's kind of, and is that a one-off or it's like a series of races?
No, it's pretty brutal. It's a one-off. So it's not a points-based system or anything like that. We just roll up to 2019 World Champs, and we had to finish top 5, and that would automatically secure our spot at the Olympics. And yes, we finished 6th by half a second. And so
what's that number again, eh? 6.
Yeah. So 6th is like a really good it's a really good way to describe our sort of ability early on, was that we were just middle of the pack or near the back of the pack consistently. And so yeah, that was I can laugh about it now, but at the time that was heartbreaking. At the time I was thinking, oh, can I even continue? And so the way qualification works is you've got that one chance, and there's 5 boats that are qualified at the World Champs the year before the Olympics. And then the year of the Olympics, there's another 2 spots that are up for grabs. But you have to go over to Switzerland to the Regatta of Death, is what they call it. It's called Last Chance Regatta, but all the athletes call it the Regatta of Death, because basically it's your last hope to get to the Olympics. And so, yeah, we were expecting to do that in 2020, when it was supposed to be 6 weeks before the Olympics in 2020. But of course, a little pandemic came along called COVID. And then all of a sudden, we found ourselves in an unqualified boat for the Olympics, with the Olympics still up in the air as to whether it would happen. And so, yeah, that was another real low point where I was thinking, I was pretty skeptical of the whole event sort of happening. And so, yeah, ended up sort of in a pretty dark place trying to work out whether I wanted to continue rowing. And so it was pretty cool at that time to have some distractions, and so I was doing a bit of work. And but at the end of the day, I was thinking that this might be it, because our only real option at that point was to train out of our garages during lockdown, and to pretty much move the goalposts from 2020 to 2021. And there was still a big maybe as to whether we could actually make it. But yeah, and so then eventually we got through 2020, which was an absolute mess of a year, and everything looked good for the Olympics happening in 2021. And so that still meant that we had to go over to Switzerland and try and secure our last 2 places, or the last 2 available spots at the for qualification. So we had to travel during COVID. 6 weeks before the Olympics, we then had to come back and isolate for 2 weeks, which is terrible preparation for the Olympics.
Well, just a nightmare with even the jet lag, eh? Like, just when you're traveling to almost the complete opposite time zone,
yeah,
and then back again within that shorter space of time. Like, it would always take us a week to get over jet lag traveling northern hemisphere to southern. So I'm sure it was something similar.
It's brutal, yeah. We do it a lot, international rowers do it a lot, because we're always traveling over to Europe for events. But that one was particularly hard. Normally we have a bit of time. To come back, acclimatise, and get our sleep patterns correct again. And at that time, when we came back from Switzerland, we were 6 weeks away from the Olympics, so we didn't really have a choice. Like, every single day became became make or break. Like, it was so important that we nailed training every single day. And so in that 2 weeks, day one, coming back when we're heinously jet lagged, we had to row 40k on the erg. Like, that was just non-negotiable. And the erg is a rowing machine for anyone who is unfamiliar.
The indoor rowing machine. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's all we had in our rooms. We were allowed one piece of equipment. We're at this awesome little hotel in Christchurch, which they looked after us really well. But yeah, we were restricted to one piece of equipment, and so each of us opted for the rowing machine, which we sort of had to. And yeah, I tallied up the amount of kilometres I rowed on the rowing machine over the course of, it ended up being 13 days. And it ended up being 380 kilometres in 13 days, which is heinous. If anyone's ever spent time on a rowing machine, you know that 1 kilometre is horrible. If I do 1 kilometre now, I'm like having a heart attack. But yeah, 380 k's in 13 days, and it was sort of a necessary evil. And yeah, rowing's one of those sports where you just get used to that sort of stuff.
And could you mix with your teammates, or were you kind of like in like individual isolation, and then you were just connecting digitally to, you know?
Yeah, we were doing this. We were basically we were restricted to just Zoom calls, and so we did this thing where we would set up our Zoom, and every morning when we would jump on the row machines, and so you'd look across and you just see your laptop screen to the right. You're rowing on the rowing machine, and you're just seeing 7 other dudes suffering with you, and you're like, oh, it's sort of making me feel a little bit better, but it is really weird. I remember we did this really hard test one day, which was basically 30 minutes flat out on the rowing machine. So just go as hard as you can for 30 minutes. And so within a couple of minutes, you were in the hurt locker. And I remember finding it just one of the hardest things I've done, because you're by yourself, you're having to motivate yourself, and all you're relying on is you're seeing your mates, they're going through it as well. But one of the hilarious things that happened was that one of our younger guys, Dan, he got within the last 5 minutes of the 30-minute test, and I could just see out of the corner of my eye just him vomiting into a bucket. And I was like, oh my God, this is distracting now.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what it was like. We just had to throw the kitchen sink at it for 2 weeks in isolation, just to make sure we didn't lose any of our fitness that we had sort of built up over years of training. And so yeah, we came out of that isolation actually really fit, because of the 380 k's we did. Yes. Pure aerobic training, and then yeah, had to travel over to Tokyo again, and yeah, got to the games. And I mean, I don't want to talk too much about it. I want to hear yeah, your input, but basically we got to the games and we won. And yeah, it's quite a crazy journey from my perspective, thinking back on like finishing 6th, finishing 4th, finishing 8th, finishing 6th, and all these results that were just below our expectation, and then getting it right that year, 2021.
Because it's so, Shaun, even at the Olympics, like you had to go through, and then you kind of went through like from your heats into like a repechage, so you weren't even straight into the final. So you kind of had another kind of round of death, row of death, kind of at the Olympics as well.
It's interesting looking back on all of it, because 2021, the 8 that we put together for 2021 was the best 8 we've ever had. Not only that, it was the best people, but that only gets you so far. Like physiologically, we had the best people. I think we had the strongest team mentally we could ever ask for, which is another thing that's essential. But then we built a pretty amazing culture, which is something I've talked about a lot, because I've been in the 8 from 2013 all the way through to 2021, and I've been in some 8s that just have not clicked on a person level, have not clicked on a team level, and the culture has been really negative and affected your performance. There's something to be said about like the psychological effect of lack of trust within a team, and I think it applies across everything, from sports teams to business teams. there has to be implicit trust in what you're doing, because it's really hard to give everything that you've got when you don't have that implicit trust. And so subconsciously, I think you hold back. And so the 2021 8 was such a different 8, such a different beast in terms of not only what we were capable of physiologically, mentally, but also the team culture we had built. And so, yeah, we went to the Olympics, and we've been through all of this crap to get there, like all of this crazy journey just to get there. And then we came to the Olympics and we stuffed it up in the heat, which is the first race of the Olympics. Like, we just got it wrong. A little bit of too much excitement, a little bit too much adrenaline, and it was almost like we were a really high-powered car just spinning the wheels. Like, we couldn't get traction. So the thing that I found really impressive is that happened, and in the past we would be really negative about, shoot, we've done it again, we've failed, how are we going to turn this around? But this aim was just straight away, it was just like, yep, we did this wrong, we're just going to fix it. Like, we're just going to get it right, and we're just going to commit to what we know works and trust the process implicitly. And so then I remember the training that we did we had like 3 or 4 days from the heat of the Olympics to the repechage. So for those who don't know, a repechage is sort of like a semi-final, but that's just the terminology we use in rowing. But basically we had to finish top 4 in the repechage to make it through to the final. But I remember that training that we did in between the heat when we got it wrong and when we raced the repechage, it's close to probably my fondest memory of rowing, because I've never been in a boat that's just been humming that quickly. Just when we're just doing laps up and down the course, just doing a training row, the boat was flying, and I thought, well, we're at the point now that it's going to take a pretty good crew to beat us, and if they can.
So you had that belief kind of at that point. You're like, actually, we could do this. Like, it's come together at the right time. Yeah.
Very quiet belief. Like, and all my family will know this very well. I will never say that we're going well. I'll never put that added pressure. So my mum and my sisters and my dad and my friends as well, they're all asking, like, how's the boat going? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, it's going all right. Like, I just can't, like, I know exactly how it's going, but I just can't, like, I don't want to add, I don't know if it's just me, but I just don't want to add that extra pressure. So yeah, but I think that they sensed that we were going really well. Like, I think my sister Erin picked up on it really well. She was just like, I just have a feeling. And I was like, sort of seeing these messages coming through, and I was like, I can't look at that right now. But I just have a really good feeling, like something seems different. And she was right, something was different. And there was a lot of small things that like made up this team that was just exceptional. And so we raced the repechage and we just stomped it. I remember thinking the repechage was easy, which is a bizarre feeling to have in an Olympic race, just feeling like you're in control. And we ended up, we didn't even sprint. We didn't have to empty the tank, and we were 2 seconds off the world record. And I thought, well, like, we're on form. So in the final, we've got a few more crews that'll be in there. The favourites, Germany and the British. Well, the British were in the repechage, but we're going to be coming up against Germany at least. And so we thought, well, we just have to do exactly what we've just done a little bit better. And so, yeah, we just trusted the process the whole way, trusted the team, trusted the people within the team, trusted what we have done. And we talked about in rowing, a really big thing is rhythm. Like, races are won and lost around rhythm. And so we talked about living or dying by the rhythm. It was just, that level of belief in it. And then ultimately, we were able to replicate and improve what we did in the repechage to win the Olympic final. Ended up being quite comfortably, which is a bizarre feeling for me. And I remember crossing the finish line thinking, ooh, like, did that actually happen? Like, I just couldn't, I was in absolute shock. Like, I remember thinking during the race, I was like, this is going really well. Like, this feels incredible. Like, this feels like what we've been practicing. And all I was focusing on was the USA crew off to my left. Because in rowing, you sort of see the crews that you're in front. Yes. And I could just see off to my left that we were pushing away this USA crew. We were getting further in front of them. And I knew they were a really fast crew. And so I was thinking, well, we must be near the front. We must be in the race at least. And I had no real idea that we were in fact half a length ahead. And so, yeah, it was sort of just that a fairy tale of things coming together at the right time. But we sort of, from the public's perspective, it certainly was that, a fairy tale coming together right at the right time. But in reality, for us, we knew how fast we were going back in New Zealand even. And we knew that if we rode how we did in training back in New Zealand, that we were pretty formidable and we could do something at the Olympics. And so for us, it was like justification of what we were feeling. It was vindication. It was, there was just a massive mixture of emotions and relief that it was over, that it got to the end. So yeah, a pretty wild journey just to get there and to race as well.
And Shaun, there was an article I saw in the paper, and you actually, and we'll come on to this later, where you kind of you created a website and kind of told your story. But it was interesting that kind of you featured, got interviewed, and Hamish Bond as well, and you talked about how kind of your approach kind of changed, which I guess probably relates to the culture thing. But I'm keen to kind of probe into that culture aspect a bit more, and then how you did come together to kind of change the approach of where you had like a really experienced double Olympic gold medalist kind of coming into the team and had an approach, and kind of, but as a team you kind of it was more grip it and rip it. I can't remember the phrase from the article, but it was kind of
It was a really interesting conversation and ongoing conversation that we had, because obviously we had Hamish Bond come in, who Hamish Bond just has an amazing track record. He's arguably the best rower to have ever lived in terms of the performances he's put down. And so obviously when he wanted to do the 8, that was massive for us. And so somebody with that level of experience and wisdom, track record, and we just wanted to, really wanted him in our crew. But it presented an interesting challenge because Hamish had come from a pair. And so that's a completely different kettle of fish, basically, to an 8, like a completely different way it operates and the way it's rode. And so, along the way, we definitely tried to replicate what Hamish had done in the pair to win. And we tried it over and over again. And I think Hamish had this debate within himself as to whether it, A, didn't work for an 8, or B, we weren't capable of doing it. And so he was like tossing up between these two things, like, is this the wrong approach for an 8, or are these guys just not capable of doing it? And so that's pretty hard as an athlete, where like he's communicating that and we're like, man, we're really trying. Like, we're really trying to do what you, and like we really believe in what Hamish does, because he's an idol for a lot of us. At the end of the day, he's your teammate. And so I felt like I was, and this is an over exaggeration, I felt like I had to tell basically a god of the sport that we needed to do it a different way. And for me, I'm a guy who's finished consistently mid-pack all his rowing career, and I was just like, look, Hamish, maybe we should try a slightly different approach. And I tell you, like, I debated on saying anything for weeks. I think Hamish referenced it, that I was very cagey about, like, here's another approach that we could try. Because I had, like, even though obviously my rowing career has been like this, I had seen some success on a certain way to row the 8, and I had the most experience in the crew of rowing the 8. So I felt like I had some grounds to stand on there. But it was a really interesting one, and I kept on referencing a specific crew, the Canadian men's 8 from 2008, and the way they rode was just violent. It was violence, and so and they won the Olympics by a lot. And so I started showing these videos, and I was like, this doesn't fit within the mold of how Hamish won. I understand that, but I feel like a men's 8 is like a big beast of a thing, and it requires horsepower. It requires, you have to have this technical ability that's underlying, like that has to be there, and cohesion. But you almost can't be thinking about it. You have to be thinking about maximum watts per stroke. So you just And so that's the realization we came to, is the 8 responded really well when we basically threw the kitchen sink at it in every way, shape or form. And so what held it together was we had an amazing coach, amazing athletes, and we were able to like get it to gel correctly, because so many times you have an 8, you do the same thing, and it ends up pulling itself apart. So you need the cohesion, but we were good enough technically to row basically rip, shit and bust, maximum effort every single stroke, and it not fall apart, not explode. And so that was the conversation we had to sort of have with the whole team, really, as to changing our idea on how to row this boat.
And could you see it in your numbers pretty quickly, like when you adopted the kind of that violent, such emotive language, the violent rowing technique, the violence. Like, could you see it pretty quickly that actually, this let's keep going?
Yeah, it was pretty immediate, and like it has to be underpinned by technique. It has to be underpinned by like crazy levels of fitness. Like, you have to be able to sustain it. But the immediate change was, the change was immediate. And I love the emotive language, because like so much of because all the rowers in the boat can feel how the boat's going, and they'll have their interpretations of it, but it's connecting language to what you're feeling and how things are going. That can have a really, really positive impact on a team, on a boat, on whatever it is. It's finding the right language that like can tell the story. And so I remember Tom Murray, our 3-seat, he used that word. Like, he talked about what if we come up against these big hairy, this is a little bit racist, but what if we come up against these big hairy European crews that are way stronger than us, that are they're brutal in the way they row? Like, how are we going to keep up? We need to be violent in the way that we put down power. And so I was like, I am attaching myself to that word, because I love that. And that was a thing that kept us, like, words like that kept us like on the path that we had identified. And then that sort of links into like the main things I saw, and the main themes that really helped us culture-wise, is that I remember I've told this story a few times. Another Tom in the boat, Tom McIntosh, came up and spoke to me one day. It was early on in the season. We'd had a few drinks, and before any important competition. And so Tom came up to me. He's young, first time in the New Zealand men's 8, and amazing athlete, exceptionally gifted. And he came up to me, and he was in his drunken state, and he was just screaming buzzwords in my ear about how we need to transcend and how we need to create critical mass. And it was interesting. Like, there were 2 ways to take that sort of interaction. Like, one, I could be annoyed because I've been in the 8 for so long. Like, what gives you the right to say, like, tell me how I've been doing things wrong, or things we need to do better? And 2 would be to sort of latch on to the energy. And I went with the latter. Like, I latched on to his energy, and I messaged him the next morning, and I said, yes, I'm with you. Let's do it. Like, blind belief. And I attributed meaning to these words that he said, and they became like sort of themes within the boat. Like, we talked about critical mass. If we've got enough people doing the 1%ers right, it becomes really hard for people to not do those 1%ers, because it's like gravity. When you see a group of people doing like their utmost to do every little thing right, it becomes the people on the periphery that end up going, oh, I better join that. That looks pretty cool. That looks pretty attractive. And that's what happened. So yeah, crazy.
Such a cool story with all the elements kind of coming together. And when you talk about the culture, like, how much of that was kind of like intentional stuff that you were doing to kind of shape the culture, versus actually just a bunch of really good people that came together and were on the same wavelength? Like, kind of, I kind of don't imagine it was kind of team building activities, because you're all super motivated athletes, you're training hard. But in terms of shaping a culture, are there lessons that we could draw in life and business from this concentrated environment you've had as, 8 super motivated, dedicated people.
Yeah, I suppose that like it does take time to build something like that, and like there's been times where we've just had people in the boat that that don't fit within a team environment like that. They're more suited to small boats where there's less people that are there's less variables. And so I suppose there's no like one answer to creating that team culture, but I do like the idea that it takes people within the team to step up and decide to do things better, to take a leap of faith and to put their reputation on the line. And so that's guys like even Hamish, like he took a leap of faith with the men's 8. Like he is a 2-time Olympic champion before he came into the men's 8. And so what more did he have to prove? And so the fact that he was willing to make that leap really set precedent for us and really gave us confidence that he sort of believed in our ability as well. And so, yeah, and I like to link it back to the idea of critical mass, is that we had Hamish who knew how to win, knew the work ethic that it took. And then we slowly had guys like really believe that over time that we could do what Hamish does. We could be as physically capable as Hamish. We could go as fast as Hamish in training. And that's what ended up happening, is that we'd split the boat, the 8, down to 4 peers. And so we're coming up against Hamish in his boat class, in his class that he's unbeaten in for, 8 years? He's never been beaten in the pier. And we are thrown down, like life on the line, trying to beat like the rowing god. And so we've got sessions where I wish they were some of the highlights for me. I wish we had recorded them, where we've just got 4 peers side by side, and that's like a testament to the level of the team, is that we could all foot it with Hamish. And so that didn't happen through any like team building exercises or anything like that. It happened with somebody setting the benchmark and pretty much putting himself out on a limb, saying, "This is what we need to do. If you can't do it, we're not going to win." And so that was a brutal and really inspiring sort of like message and standard that he set. And yeah, I remember one of my fondest memories is having a row in the pier against Hamish, and we led. It was we were coming back from a long row, so it was like a 10K stretch all the way back, and we led Hamish and his peers partner at the time, Tom. We led them all the way to the last 500 meters of a 10K stretch, and then he finally broke through us, and we popped and exploded. But all I was thinking about was beating Hamish, just beating Hamish. We didn't do it in the end. Like I was struggling to walk after that row, but it was like, wow, we could never have done that, we never believed that we could have done that, just like a few years ago. So yeah, some pretty cool stuff that went into like creating that culture. And then because it was all there, and every individual had proven themselves in one way or another on the rowing machine, on water. Everyone just trusted everyone else. So yeah, pretty powerful environment to be a part of, and that's why I was like, I need to write about this. Like I need to get this down, because there's some really powerful lessons for me that I need to keep on referring back to in my life, but also I think there's a lot of lessons that apply to any team, to any workplace, to relationships. And so and that's what I found myself doing after the Olympics, was creating a website, creating a platform where I could sort of share what I'd learned, my experiences, and writing some blogs and offering some like team culture sort of insight with businesses. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and I've really enjoyed expanding on what I learned and finding new applications for it.
Be cool to explore kind of, because I'm keen to come back to that in a little bit more detail, but also when you talked about sort of being rock bottom, kind of finishing dead last, and you thought, actually, in our last catch up, you mentioned about I needed to have a plan B, and so that was kind of when you started kind of looking at your career, and obviously you studied and had a degree, and and it was quite countercultural in terms of within the rowing environment that you could actually have a day job and row at the highest level. So I think I really enjoyed hearing that story as well. So it'd be cool just kind of almost recount kind of that journey as well, and how you're kind of almost in some ways kind of setting the a benchmark that it's actually possible, and in some ways actually healthy for
yeah. So it was around that time where I was rock bottom, where I realized that I was really struggling with like identity issues as to like who I was beyond just being a rower, and I was really struggling with the idea of putting so much into this, and in my mind, not being successful, even though I'd been to the Olympics, and with a bit of perspective, like it's not all about winning, but when you're in it, it was all about winning. It was all about getting medals. And so I was really struggling with that. I was really struggling with the identity around who I was, and I bump into old schoolmates and they'd ask what I was up to, and I'd be like, oh, still rowing. And I really felt like I needed something else. And I felt like I needed a backstop, because I'd been really low at times, like thinking that I needed to stop rowing. I needed to move on. It wasn't that healthy for my mental well-being. And that I needed to have a backup plan. And so a lovely company, Kaz Design, came along, and they had a job space in an industry that I had no experience in. Basically, I had no experience in anything. All I was bringing was I was a hard worker, and I thought I was reasonably switched on. I had a degree in communications and international management, but I picked up this job at Kaz Design, and it really grew from there. I realized that this is so important for me as a person, but also it's something that I think that we've seen a big shift in with athletes, is that it's really healthy and good for you to work alongside your sport. And because I worked from pretty much late 2018 all the way up to the Olympics alongside my rowing, I was doing sort of 10 to 15 hours a week, so nothing massive, but when you're doing that alongside sort of 25, 30 hours of training a week, it becomes big weeks. But
big commitment, yeah.
Yeah, I just found it really fulfilling, and gave me a lot of energy and perspective on the fact that there was a world outside of sport that athletes need to be prepared for as well. They need to be prepared that if you win an Olympic gold medal, sure, that's fantastic. That shows a lot of it shows evidence of a lot of soft skills that you've got. But when you go into a working environment, what else are you bringing to the table? And so, yeah, that was something that I sort of realized, whether it's maybe a bit harsh on athletes or harsh on myself, but I realized that I needed to bring more to the table than just being really good at a sport. And I wanted to be identified as more than just an athlete. And so this was a really good fit for me. And it then, yeah, it grew. And I liked being able to say, like, oh yeah, I'm an Olympic athlete, but I also design websites. I do SEO. I do Google Ads. So that felt like I'd achieved something else outside of sport. And since then, we've seen like a real shift of athletes working alongside their sport. And I think there was probably initially a little bit of fear that working would inhibit sport, like it would come at the cost of sport. Because at the end of the day, we are professional athletes. We get paid to do our sport, although it's not. It's enough to live on, but only just. And then, so yeah, this was really important. And we've seen a really cool business pop up called Podium Recruit. I'm a big supporter of what those guys do. They basically connect athletes to part-time working opportunities. And it fits a really good niche for like small, medium businesses that just need somebody to come in and do 10 to 15 hours a week, and they need somebody like switched on and motivated, and they can grab one of the athletes. There's heaps of athletes around that are in the same situation as me. And so yeah, that was from at the time, it certainly was like initially it was a backup plan. And then I realized that it was really important for me as a person that I'm something else beyond just an athlete. And yeah, and then so I finished up in Tokyo. I initially sort of came back to rowing just to make sure. I sort of knew that I was probably done. I burnt the candle all the way out. Like I'd given it everything just to get there. I came back, started training, and just to make sure, got a few months in and realised, yep, I am 100% done with the sport. I did leave the door open that maybe if the passion comes back in a year, I could come back. But I was really excited that I had something else to do, that I had a skill set that I could do. I could basically put food on my own table after sport. And even then, it was an extremely hard transition of losing that thing that had like been such a main part of your life, and then it came to an end. And I couldn't imagine how hard it would have been if I didn't have something else to go to.
Yes, yeah, because I remember when the rugby season would end. I didn't play at a super high level, but rugby season would end, and just that camaraderie and the training and just the buzz you get from playing. But then you've done it at the highest level. Stood on the top step of an Olympic podium. That's kind of a big height to descend from.
Yeah.
Putting it lightly.
Yeah, a lot of and like this is something I did like some actual research into, is because I like the lowest I've ever been in my life. Contrary to what anyone would believe, the lowest I've ever been in my life is pretty much 2 weeks after we won Olympic gold medal, where I was just like, man, what am I doing now? Like you just wake up in the morning and you feel like for 8 years you've had purpose, you've had what I like to call glorious purpose, and then you don't have that anymore. You've done it, and so like some days I was just waking up, staring at the ceiling, going, man, what am I going to do today? Like what is going to be able to fill this like void? And so yeah, it happens at every level. Like it's not exclusive to being Olympics. Like you really, I think humans really enjoy working towards goals, working with the team, and when that ends, it can be really hard. And so I was doing research into like what I was feeling, and I was talking to psychologists, and I was like, yeah, this is what everyone goes through. Like when they feel like they've either reached their goal, or they're about to retire or something like that from sport. Post Olympic blues, it's a real thing, and you'd expect to feel your best self after winning the Olympics, but yeah, you do feel quite empty, and then you got to replace it. You got to find other stuff to do. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing.
And that was kind of about that time, like when you're coming back, and this is quite counter to most athletes, where we're part of the athlete friendly network with High Performance Sport New Zealand. So we give the athletes websites for $1, and the only reason it's $1 is because our billing system doesn't work at 100% discounts. But so we basically give athletes websites to kind of help them get sponsors and tell their story and update their supporters. But actually very few, even though it's like a no obligations, they don't have to promote us, we just kind of do it, but very few kind of take that up. But you actually after your career, you built a site for the Kiwi 8, so there's Kiwi 8 website, but then you also built like SK Rowing. And actually but this morning I actually Googled Shaun Kirkham just to see actually what came up. And it's interesting that it's your Rowing New Zealand profile, and then your Olympic profile, and then it's your own website. And then there's the news articles, and it's pretty hard to trump, newspapers, because Google loves news content and fresh content. But I thought that was pretty cool that it was your site that sort of was high ranking. But yeah, tell me about that journey where you kind of decided to actually, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a website to tell my story.
Yeah, I suppose it's testament to my SEO skills right there that I was actually appearing. It hasn't been live for that long, but yeah, it's an interesting one, and it comes back to, I mentioned it before, like when your parents or your family are asking how things are going, and for me, like I didn't want to be too arrogant. I didn't want to like fill up with like false hope. I didn't want to put too much pressure on. And so it was interesting, like there was resistance for me, and I think it's the same with other athletes, of making a website while they're in the thick of it, because they're like, oh, that's extra pressure, like I don't want to come across like, what have I done? Like I think as New Zealanders, we just like endlessly understate our achievements. But then it was after I'd achieved it that I was like, yeah, yeah, I really want to do this. Like, I really want to make a website. For me, initially, it was like I wanted to tell my story through a blog, and then it sort of evolved. Like, I came back from the Olympics and we went straight into a lockdown, and so I got bored and I was like doing different things off my website. Like, I even started selling some custom row suits, which I thought were quite funny. But the main purpose of that website was to tell my story, and so I offered sort of I wrote blogs, so extensive blogs, sort of going through the whole journey up until winning the Olympics, which I'm pretty proud of, and I know that I'm going to look back at those very thankfully that I actually wrote it down while it was all fresh in my mind.
That'll be part of the movie script too, Shaun. Yeah, I think the script writers will thank you. Yeah,
I'd love that. And yeah, I was worried about being in the pub in 10 years or 20 years time and trying to recount the story to somebody, and just like all these lies are coming through. Every year we get further in front of the competition or something like that. So really nice to have like a clean example of what actually happened at the time. And then, yeah, like I wanted to speak to other athletes, so I wanted to do some mentoring, and I also wanted to get in front of sort of businesses as well in terms of telling the story, because I was like, I can see how this relates to not only sport but business, and I want to express that. And so, yeah, and that's been really fulfilling, and there has been some real good appetite for the lessons I've learned, specifically in the men's eight. And so, yeah, that was the reason why the website came about, and I'm really thankful that I did. And it's ended up being like I've got like two heads that I almost juggle, like where I've got on one side I've got SK Rowing, and then the other side I've got my other website which I've just made, which is SK Digital, which is more focused on sort of my professional offerings with websites and SEO. But yeah, it's quite cool just having them there as a resource as well. And I think that I spoke to you about this, Grant, that I think that what Rocketspark does with offering athletes free hosting on websites is fantastic. But I think as Kiwis, the athletes will end up wanting to make a website not about themselves, but about what they're doing. So a lot of athletes have sort of side hustles or have some other interests. So I've got some friends that does photography and a few other things, and a couple of the rowers even sell cherries. Like, that's their thing. Like, they sell cherries over Christmas, and they crank. They sell so many cherries. It's funny, at that time of the year, that's all they're talking about is cherry season. And so I could see them taking advantage of like that Rocketspark offering for that service, because it is one of those things when you're in the thick of it, you just don't want to be too public. You don't want to put too much extra pressure on yourself. But yeah, I'm certainly encouraging athletes to make use of it. The interesting thing is that while you are really fatigued from your training, it's actually really hard to like get that motivation to do it. But it is really important. It is really important that you're doing something that's outside of sport. You're learning something new, that you're getting ready for life after sport, whether it's developing a hobby or something like that.
Yeah, it's been cool for us to see, over the years, athletes kind of working on it, and when we've reached out to a couple that said they found it almost therapeutic to kind of work on something that is a break from the day-to-day training, in terms of what they're doing. And actually the motivation to actually start connecting and looking at the opportunity was, I think it was the London Olympics, where I think it was like a whitewater canoeist built a website, not on Rocketspark, but it built a website to sell recipe books to fund his campaign. I was like, actually, we could help with that. If we can help athletes kind of fund their campaign and tell their story, then that's cool. Hey, Shaun, tell us. Oh, sorry, you go.
Yeah, a lot of the time, like say, I always reference my my friend Cameron Webster because he's a fantastic photographer. But a lot of the time, like he's in the development squad at the moment, and so he's on barely enough just to sort of live, and so it's sort of a necessity for him to supplement his income with his income that he makes through photography. And so yeah, it is it's a really good thing what Rocketspark are doing with offering that that option for the free hosting. And so so athletes can continue to do it and not skimp on their meals, not just living on rice and chicken. You can actually have a bit of variety in your meals and buy things that are necessary for training.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, hopefully it helps. Hey, Shaun, and tell us your journey now in terms of setting up SK Digital, and I can see the analogies, I guess, in terms of like where you're talking about the 1% with rowing, and we see it with websites. So people that kind of do those lots of little 1% things, you know, where you're doing your blogs and things like that. But tell us about what you're doing now with SK Digital and kind of how it came about. Where you had opportunities come your way, you know, after the Olympics, and there's something about, you know, I'll admit it, quite appealing about connecting with an athlete that's kind of stood on that top podium and gone like, this is cool, you know. And so you had kind of offers come your way, but you've kind of gone down the hard graft of starting and running a business, which, yeah, a lot of, yeah, kudos to you. I know it's tricky getting going.
Yeah, you'll have experience of this as well, Grant. But it was one of those things where I was sort of like I had reached that goal in rowing, and I felt like I needed to replace it with something that was equally ambitious and equally like that glorious purpose. Like I needed something to replace that with, and so I had some opportunities come along with some job offers, and I certainly initially sort of applied for a few jobs, got some experience with interviewing and had a few opportunities, but there was sort of like time between interviewing for these jobs and then a few weeks later takes a bit of time and they're interested in hiring me. And in that time I realized, I don't know if jumping straight into a job is, I don't know if that's in line with my values right now. Like I think that I need that challenge. I need to be entrepreneurial. I need to be feeling like I'm having like direct impact on and helping people. And I thought it was a bit of a shame not to use the skill set that I've learned through making websites. And some of the things I became really interested in was SEO, Google Ads. And so I thought, I'm just going to try this. And so I made it very public, but I was like, well, I'm just going to go and try and make my own business work. And if it fails, then that's something I'm pretty familiar with, and I back myself to get out of it and find something else. And so I was willing to take the risk of it failing. And so I threw myself into it and created my business, SK Digital. And so that's basically making use of all the skills that I've picked up over the last few years. And the idea is that it is about the 1%ers, like we talked about, and it comes pretty naturally to me that you can't just have a website. You have to have SEO. You have to have things like Google Analytics. You have to have things like Google My Business and Google Search Console. Like all of those little things combined, and then you couple that with Google Ads, means that you're doing the 1%ers. And so I was applying like the athlete mindset to what I'm doing with SK Digital. And now I'm a month 2 into SK Digital, so it's all very fresh. I'm all very wide-eyed and naive about about this. It might be completely different in 4 to 6 months. Like I might be going, oh, what am I doing? But I'm willing to take that risk, and it is sort of that ambitious goal. And it's like looking back on like my rowing career, I was always sort of understating how good we were, how things were going. You're always sort of simplifying your own efforts, but it's nice to look back and to realize that that's probably false humbleness in some ways, or just unnecessary humbleness. And I like to think now that I'm a little bit more confident in my ability to deliver some like really good products that are really helping people. And so that's really filling the void for me at the moment without rowing. And so it's become the new glorious purpose is basically to help small to medium businesses. I got this catchphrase that came about randomly while I was writing my website. I was like, I was talking to my partner. I was like, it's all about like getting your digital ducks in a row. And then all of a sudden that just became the thing. Like that, there are digital ducks that every business needs, and that's what I wanted to address as a package that just addressed those said digital ducks. The website, the SEO, the Google integrations, which is a key one, and Google Ads, and and even writing some content. And so yeah, I quite liked the idea of that I was making, hopefully coming into businesses that needed help in the digital space, and I was having like a real impact, and I do really want to like do a good job.
It's this is actually a really cool analogy actually when you're talking about ducks in a row, and it's like because we've made getting a website really simple. It's probably the only plug for Rocketspark I'll give is we have made the process simple, but then day one of their site going live, people will contact our customer success team and go, almost a bit grumpy that why aren't I top of Google? And it's kind of like getting the website, they've kind of put the boat in the water, but they haven't even yet put their hands on the oars and done any kind of content production. It's kind of like, and even then they might get one going, but with your 8 you kind of got 4 people looking after each side of the boat, haven't they, in terms of otherwise you're just going to go around in circles.
It's a fantastic I love being able to use the analogy like from a sporting context, like in rowing in a men's 8, like a website might just be one person in an 8. That's just one thing, and then all these other things have to be working in unison for you to be basically visible. And then the age-old question, why aren't I appearing in Google search results? And like there's part of it that I've really realized is it's just a little bit around taking the time to explain and to educate around why that's happening, and why things like appearing in search results always takes time, but there's ways that we can speed it up doing these other things. And so that's I love being able to use analogies from my experience and connecting new meaning to them in a new context.
The nice thing with working with the little, like small medium businesses, is that the ones that you can genuinely help and give you the capacity to help them, you can make a real difference. Like you can actually transform their lives by the income. Even ones I think of that have kind of been able to sit down and just personally kind of coach, and it's so rewarding. And I think the cool thing with what you're creating is we've seen it time and time again that if you create at a fair price, do what you say you're going to do, make it really transparent what you're doing, and explain things, you'll end up with more than you can handle. Like it's just, there's so much potential right now, and there's like organizations like Digital Boost, so government funded, to kind of help people realize the value of this, and the ones that kind of adopt and actually harness these tools. So I think you should have fun. Like I'm excited for you in terms of what you're creating, because like you can come alongside these businesses and genuinely help them. And actually the team kind of fast on the water and fast in the digital world told me about a client that kind of they'd connected you with, and then you'd sort of turned around a website within a week, where you kind of had the brief, got the content, got the site built, got them live, and they thought it was Christmas. So yeah, pretty cool.
Like I do like that, like the thought of being able to just like you say, do stuff fair price, do it well, do it quickly, be very transparent, and I do like the idea that I suppose it's like the work ethic that's built into me through rowing. Like I want to get jobs done. Like I want to be sort of maybe even under promising and over delivering in terms of timelines, in terms of quality. And it does feel pretty good coming into a small business where the things I do, the things that I can set up, make such an impact on the overall performance of the business when they're done right. And part of the reason why I was hesitant to go into a work for somebody else is that I sort of really liked being the idea of being the friendly neighborhood designer, website builder, digital guy, is that because you can have such an impact on businesses when they're going from no digital presence to all of a sudden all their digital ducks. Like that was really appealing to me, and as opposed to going in and trying to milk that extra like 5% out of an already established digital presence or with a business.
Yes.
And so I really liked the idea of that, because it felt like it was just doing a lot of good and helping a lot of people out.
Yeah. Well done. Yeah. Hey, Shaun, it's like thanks so much. Like I could actually talk to you for there's so much we could chat about and so many analogies and crossovers, but I appreciate you taking the time just to kind of share your story, and hopefully well not hopefully we'll publish this up, and hopefully some people watch it, and it helps them in their journey, and it inspires them amongst the peaks and the troughs of competition and life and business, that kind of believing you can do it, and a good team around you, and the right expertise, and focusing on the 1%. It's a great story to tell, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh no, thanks for having me, Grant. And I would love to hear from other people, like their story as to ways that it relates, because I'm sure this is pretty universal, like what I've talked about across business and sport. All those, getting those little things right that make a real difference. So for anyone who watches this, feel free to reach out. I'd love to have a chat. But it's been a pleasure, Grant.
Good one. Thanks, Shaun. Yeah, and that's SK Rowing and SK Digital, both ending in .co.nz. So
Yes,
I think that's right, hey? Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Thanks, Shaun.
Cheers, Grant.
We'll catch you.